When he walked through the kitchen, he never imagined the simple cook hid a devastating secret. He froze seeing the dish she had prepared, the same recipe his beloved used to make before disappearing 25 years ago. Get ready for a story that will touch your heart. The December morning air carried that familiar chill that made David Lancaster's bones ache with memories he'd rather forget. 25 years to the day, and still, every December 15th felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He stood at the pass of the Southern Heirloom's kitchen, watching steam rise from the grit station, trying to focus on anything but the calendar. "Chef, the new girl's working the gumbo station today," Rose called out from behind the expo line. Her voice carried that knowing tone she'd perfected over 15 years of managing his restaurant. Rose had been there the morning Lauren disappeared. She'd been the one to find the cold, impersonal letter left on the nightstand. She'd been the one to hold David together when his world crumbled. David nodded without looking up from his clipboard, checking off inventory items with mechanical precision. Chloe Anderson, 24 years old, 1 week on the job. Good references from a small place in Savannah. Clean background check. Nothing remarkable about her except for the way she moved around a kitchen like she'd been born in one. "She's got good instincts," Rose had told him when they'd hired her. "Reminds me of someone." At the time, David had dismissed it as Rose being sentimental. Now, as he caught a whiff of something that made his stomach drop and his heart race, he wasn't so sure. The aroma hit him like a freight train. Rich, complex, with layers that spoke of patience and tradition. It was the smell of roux cooked low and slow until it reached that perfect caramel color, mixed with the holy trinity of onions, celery, and bell peppers. But it was more than that. There was something in the blend of spices, something in the way the scents married together, that made David's hands shake as he gripped his clipboard. He'd smelled that exact combination only once before in his life. "What the hell?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the clatter of pans and the hiss of sautéing vegetables. David set down his clipboard and walked toward the gumbo station like a man in a trance. There she was, Chloe Anderson, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her left hand stirring the massive pot in slow, circular motions. She added the roux in small portions, never dumping it all at once, letting each addition incorporate fully before adding the next. Just like Lauren used to do. David's throat went dry. He watched, transfixed, as Chloe reached for the spice rack with her right hand while continuing to stir with her left. She grabbed bottles without looking, her movements fluid and confident. A pinch of this, a dash of that. The same combination Lauren had guarded like a state secret. "No way," David breathed. "No goddamn way." Chloe looked up at the sound of his voice, her brown eyes meeting his for just a moment. Something flickered across her face, a flash of recognition that was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Everything okay, chef?" she asked, her voice soft with just a hint of a Georgia accent. "I can adjust the seasoning if you want to taste it." David stepped closer, his chef's instincts warring with something deeper, more primal. The rational part of his mind cataloged the technical aspects of her cooking. Perfect roux consistency, proper ingredient ratios, excellent timing. But the part of him that remembered lying in bed at 3 a.m, watching Lauren practice these same movements, was screaming, "Where'd you learn to make gumbo like that?" The question came out rougher than he'd intended. Chloe's stirring never faltered, but he caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Trial and error, mostly. Had some old recipes I picked up along the way." She paused, then added, "I grew up in an orphanage. The sisters there, they taught me what they could, but most of what I know came from this old cookbook I've had since I was little." David felt the floor shift beneath his feet. An orphanage in Georgia, 24 years old. The math was too clean, too perfect, too terrifying to be coincidence. Which orphanage? The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Now Chloe did pause in her stirring, turning to face him fully. There was wariness in her expression, the look of someone who'd learned early that too many questions usually meant trouble. "St. Catherine's. It's a small place outside Savannah, run by the Sisters of Mercy." Her chin lifted slightly, defensively. "Why?" Before David could answer, Rose appeared at his elbow like she had a sixth sense for emotional disasters in the making. "David," she said quietly, her hand finding his arm. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." A ghost. If only it were that simple. I'm fine, he lied, his eyes never leaving Chloe's face. He was cataloging details now, searching for something, anything, that would either confirm or deny the impossible possibility that was taking root in his mind. She had Lauren's nose, the same slight upturn at the tip, the same way of tilting her head when she was concentrating. And those hands. David's breath caught as he watched Chloe resume stirring. She was humming under her breath, so softly he almost missed it, a wordless melody that made the hair on his arm stand up. Lauren used to hum that same tune. "Chef," Chloe's voice seemed to come from very far away. "The gumbo's ready for the okra. Should I add it now?" David blinked, forcing himself back to the present. Around them, the kitchen hummed with its usual controlled chaos. Orders were being called out, plates were clattering, and life was going on as if his world hadn't just tilted on its axis. "Yeah," he managed. "Add the okra and Chloe." "Yes, chef. That recipe you mentioned, the old cookbook. Where exactly did you get it?" This time, there was no mistaking the shadow that crossed her face. "It was left with me when I was a baby, along with some clothes and..." She hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Some other things. The sisters said my mother wanted me to have it." "Your mother." The words echoed in David's head like a prayer and a curse all at once. Rose's grip on his arm tightened. She'd been listening to every word, and he could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. Rose had loved Lauren like a sister. She'd been the one to help David search for her when she first disappeared. She'd been the one to finally convince him to stop looking. "David," Rose whispered, so low only he could hear. "You don't think..." "I don't know what to think," he whispered back. But that was a lie. He knew exactly what he was thinking, and it scared the hell out of him. 25 years ago, Lauren had vanished from his life like smoke. 25 years ago, she'd left behind nothing but a cold letter about finding a better opportunity somewhere else. 25 years ago, his heart had been ripped out and stomped on, and he'd spent every day since then trying to build something worthwhile from the wreckage. And now this girl, this young woman who cooked like Lauren, moved like Lauren, hummed like Lauren, was standing in his kitchen, stirring gumbo with the same secret techniques that Lauren had sworn she'd never taught anyone else. David watched Chloe add the okra to the pot, her movements precise and practiced. She tasted the mixture with her pinky finger, just like Lauren used to do, and nodded with satisfaction. "Perfect," she murmured to herself, then looked up to find David still staring at her. "Is there something else you need, chef?" "Yeah," David thought. "I need to know if my life is about to get turned upside down all over again." Instead, he said, "Just keep doing what you're doing. That gumbo smells incredible." As he walked away from the station, his mind was already racing ahead to all the questions he needed answered. St. Catherine's Orphanage, Sisters of Mercy, an old cookbook, and a mother who'd wanted her daughter to have it. Behind him, he heard Chloe humming again, that same wordless melody that Lauren used to sing while she cooked, the same tune that used to lull him to sleep on lazy Sunday mornings when the world was full of possibility and the future stretched out before them like an unwritten love letter. 25 years, a lifetime of questions, and now, maybe, just maybe, he was about to get some answers. Whether he was ready for them or not, the lunch rush hit the Southern Heirloom like a tidal wave, but David barely noticed the controlled chaos around him. His eyes kept drifting back to the gumbo station where Chloe worked with an efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. Every movement was deliberate, practiced, like she'd been making that exact recipe for years instead of days. "Order up 2 gumbo, 1 with extra andouille," Chloe called out, sliding the bowls across the pass with the confidence of a veteran line cook. David caught the plates, his fingers brushing hers briefly as she handed them over. Her hands were small but strong, with calluses in all the right places. The marks of someone who'd spent serious time with a knife and a cutting board, just like Lauren's had been. "Behind you, chef." Marcus, their sous chef, squeezed past with a hotel pan full of jambalaya. The kitchen was hitting its stride now. That perfect rhythm where every cook knew exactly where they fit in the dance. David forced himself to focus on expediting orders, but his peripheral vision stayed locked on Chloe. She was tasting the gumbo again, using that same pinky finger technique that had always driven him crazy when Lauren did it. Not because it was unsanitary. Every good cook tasted their food constantly. but because it was so distinctly her. "She's got good instincts," Rose said, appearing beside him with a stack of clean plates. "Real natural talent." "Yeah," David replied absently, watching Chloe adjust the seasoning with tiny, precise movements. She added just a whisper of hot sauce, stirred twice counterclockwise, then tasted again, the exact same sequence Lauren used to follow. Rose followed his gaze and frowned. "David, you've been staring at that girl all morning like she's some kind of puzzle you need to solve. Haven't you noticed?" David kept his voice low, mindful of the other cooks nearby. "The way she moves around the station, the way she holds her spoon." "I've noticed a lot of things," Rose said carefully. "Question is, what exactly are you thinking?" Before David could answer, Chloe started humming again, that same wordless melody, barely audible over the sizzle of the sauté pans and the chatter of the waitstaff. But David heard it, and from the way Rose's face went pale, she heard it too. "Holy shit," Rose whispered. "David, I know what it is." His voice came out sharper than he'd intended. The lunch rush continued around them, orders flying in and plates flying out, but David felt like he was standing in the eye of a hurricane. Everything was moving at normal speed, except for him and Rose, who stood frozen in a moment of terrible recognition. "Chef Lancaster." Chloe's voice cut through his thoughts. She was looking at him with concern, her dark eyes studying his face. "You sure you're okay? You look like you need to sit down." "I'm fine," David lied for the second time that day. "Just tell me more about that cookbook you mentioned, the one from when you were a baby." Chloe's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "It's nothing special, just some old Southern recipes. Why are you so interested?" "Humor me," she shrugged, turning back to stir the gumbo. "It's handwritten, real old-fashioned script, like someone took their time with each recipe. Whoever wrote it really knew their way around a kitchen." She paused, her voice softening. "Sometimes I wonder if it was my mother's. The sisters never told me much about her, but they said she wanted me to learn how to cook." David's chest tightened. "What else do you remember about that night, when you were left at the orphanage?" "I don't remember anything. I was just a baby." Chloe's stirring became more aggressive. "Look, Chef, I don't mean to be rude, but I've been answering questions about my past my whole life. Social workers, potential adoptive families that never worked out, curious strangers. I learned early on that my story makes people uncomfortable. Why would it make people uncomfortable? Because nobody wants to hear about a baby abandoned in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and a cookbook full of secrets." Her voice had an edge now, years of defensive walls going up. "People prefer happy endings, not stories about mothers who disappear into thin air." The spoon in David's hand clattered to the floor. Chloe looked up sharply at the sound, and for just a moment, he saw something flicker across her face, a vulnerability that she quickly masked with professional composure. "Sorry," David said, bending to pick up the spoon. Butterfingers, but his hands were steady as rocks. It was his entire world that was shaking. "David," Rose's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to talk now." She grabbed his arm and steered him toward the small office behind the kitchen, past the walk-in coolers and the prep stations where the afternoon crew was getting ready for dinner service. "What the hell is going on?" Rose demanded the moment she closed the office door behind them. "And don't you dare tell me it's nothing, because I've known you for 15 years and I've never seen you look like this." David sank into the chair behind his desk, running his hands through his hair. The office was cramped and cluttered, papers scattered across every surface, but it was the only private space in the restaurant. He needed a moment to think, to process what he was feeling. "You heard her humming," he said finally. "I heard her humming Lauren's song, the one she used to sing while she cooked Sunday breakfast." Rose perched on the edge of the desk, her expression serious. "But that doesn't mean anything, David. Lots of people know that melody. And the cooking techniques, the way she holds her spoon, the way she tastes the food. Coincidence. The spice combinations. The exact same roux technique that Lauren swore she learned from her grandmother, and never taught anyone else." Rose was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "David, I know what you're thinking, but you can't go down this road again. Remember what happened the last time you thought you'd found a lead about Lauren?" He remembered. 3 years after Lauren disappeared, He'd gotten a call from a woman in Atlanta who claimed she'd seen someone matching Lauren's description working at a diner. David had driven through the night, hope burning in his chest like acid, only to find a stranger who looked nothing like Lauren up close. The crash afterward had been devastating. "This is different," David said. "How?" "Because this time, it's not about finding Lauren." His voice cracked slightly. "Rose, what if Lauren was pregnant when she left?" The words hung in the air between them like a live wire. Rose stared at him, her face cycling through shock, understanding, and something that might have been fear. I think Chloe is 24 years old, grew up in an orphanage in Georgia, and cooks exactly like the woman I loved 25 years ago." David looked up at Rose, and she could see the hope and terror warring in his eyes. "I think the timing is too perfect to be coincidence." "David, even if that's true, what are you going to do? Walk up to her and ask for a DNA test? Tell her you think you might be her father based on the way she stirs gumbo?" "I don't know." The admission felt like a defeat. "I don't know anything right now except that being around her feels like," he searched for the right words, "like coming home and having your heart broken at the same time." Rose reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. "Honey, I understand, I do. But you need to be careful here. That girl out there has been through enough disappointment in her life. Don't go filling her head with possibilities unless you're damn sure. And what if I am sure? What if she really is my daughter? And I've been living 15 minutes away from her for God knows how long. Then we'll figure it out. Together." Rose stood up, smoothing down her apron. "But first, you need to get through the rest of this shift without staring at her like she's a ghost. The rest of the kitchen is starting to notice." David nodded, knowing she was right. He couldn't afford to fall apart in the middle of service. Whatever was happening here, whatever connections were being made, they would have to wait until he could think clearly. But as he followed Rose back into the kitchen, he caught sight of Chloe plating the last of the lunch gumbo orders. She moved with such grace, such natural rhythm, that it took his breath away. And when she looked up and smiled at him, a real smile, not the guarded expression she'd worn earlier, he saw something in her face that made his heart stop. She had Lauren's smile, the same slight dimple in her left cheek, the same way of tilting her head just a fraction to the left. 25 years of questions were about to become 25 years of answers. He just wasn't sure he was ready for what those answers might be. The drive to Savannah took David through back roads lined with Spanish moss and memories he'd tried to bury. He'd called in sick for the first time in 5 years, leaving Rose to handle the dinner service while he chased ghosts down Highway 17. The December air was crisp through his truck's open windows, carrying the salt scent of marshland and the weight of questions that had kept him awake all night. St. Catherine's Home for Children sat at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by ancient oak trees draped in moss like tattered curtains. The building was older than David had expected. A sprawling Victorian house painted white with blue shutters, its wraparound porch dotted with rocking chairs that moved gently in the coastal breeze. David parked his truck and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. What the hell was he doing here? Rose's words echoed in his head. Don't go filling her head with possibilities unless you're damn sure. But how could he be sure without asking the questions that might destroy whatever fragile peace Chloe had built for herself? A woman emerged from the front door as he approached, elderly, wearing a simple gray dress and a warm smile that immediately put him at ease. She moved with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent decades caring for others. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice carrying the soft drawl of coastal Georgia. "I'm looking for someone who might have information about one of your former residents, Chloe Anderson. She would have been brought here as a baby. Maybe 24 years ago?" The woman's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I'm Sister Dorothy. I've been running this place for 30 years, so I remember most of our children. May I ask why you're interested in Chloe's story?" David had rehearsed this conversation during the drive, but now that he was here, the words felt clumsy in his mouth. I think I might be her father." Sister Dorothy studied his face with eyes that had seen too much heartbreak to be easily fooled. After a long moment, she nodded toward the porch. "Let's sit. This isn't a conversation for standing in the yard." They settled into two of the rocking chairs, the ancient wood creaking softly beneath them. In the distance, David could hear children playing in the yard behind the house, laughter and shouts that spoke of resilience and hope, despite difficult beginnings. "Tell me what you know about Chloe's arrival," David said. Sister Dorothy was quiet for so long that David wondered if she'd decided not to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. "It was December 15th, 1999. I remember, because it was the coldest night we'd had that winter. I was doing my evening rounds when I heard a car in the driveway. By the time I got to the front door, whoever it was had already gone, but there was a baby on the porch. Couldn't have been more than a few weeks old." David's heart hammered against his ribs. December 15th, the same day Lauren had disappeared from his life. Was there anything else? Any indication of who left her? There was a small bag, some baby clothes, a bottle, diapers, and a few other things. Sister Dorothy's eyes never left his face. A silver necklace with a garlic charm, protection against evil, according to some old traditions, and a cookbook, handwritten recipes, all Southern cuisine. The world tilted slightly. David gripped the arms of his rocking chair, trying to process what he was hearing. "Did you see who left her?" "The mother. I caught a glimpse through the window. A young woman, very pale, very thin. She looked frightened, desperate." Sister Dorothy paused. "Mr. Lancaster. And yes, I did catch your name when you introduced yourself. What makes you think you're Chloe's father?" David told her about Lauren, about their relationship, about the morning she disappeared without explanation, about the cold letter that had ended their life together. He told her about Chloe showing up at his restaurant, about the cooking techniques and the humming and the way she moved around a kitchen like she'd inherited every gesture. Sister Dorothy listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "The woman who brought Chloe here," she said finally. "She stayed for just a few minutes, long enough to make sure the baby was safe, to give me the bag of belongings. Before she left, she said something that has stayed with me all these years." "What did she say?" "She said, 'Take care of her. Teach her to cook. It's all I can leave her.' Then she looked back at the baby one more time and whispered, 'Maybe someday she'll find him. Maybe someday they'll both be safe.'" David felt like he'd been punched in the chest. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity, painting a picture he wasn't sure he was ready to see. "Sister Dorothy, I need you to tell me everything you remember about that night. Every detail, no matter how small." The nun rocked gently, her eyes distant with memory. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s, brown hair, brown eyes. She was wearing a coat that was too big for her, like she'd grabbed whatever was handy. Her hands were shaking. Whether from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. Did she seem injured? Hurt in any way? Now that you mention it, yes, she favored her left side when she walked, and there was a bruise on her cheek that she tried to hide with her hair. Sister Dorothy's voice grew soft. "I offered to let her stay, to help her figure out her situation. We've always been more than just an orphanage here. We're a sanctuary for women who need a safe place to land." But she refused. She said it wasn't safe, that if she stayed, bad men would come looking for her, and she couldn't put the children at risk. Sister Dorothy stopped rocking. "Mr. Lancaster, there's something else. Something I've never told anyone because I wasn't sure it mattered." David leaned forward. "What?" "The woman came back, 3 different times over the years, always at night, always when she thought no one would see her. She never approached the house, never tried to make contact with Chloe. She would just sit in a car at the end of our driveway and watch the children play in the yard." "When was the last time?" "About 5 years ago, Christmas Eve, 2019. I saw her through my bedroom window. Same woman, older but unmistakable. She sat there for maybe an hour, and when Chloe came outside to help with the Christmas decorations." Sister Dorothy's voice caught. The woman started crying, just sat in her car and sobbed like her heart was breaking. David closed his eyes, trying to imagine Lauren sitting alone in the darkness, watching a daughter she could never claim, never hold, never know. The cruelty of it was almost unbearable. Did she ever try to make contact? Leave anything? That last time, yes. After Chloe went back inside, the woman got out of her car and put something in our mailbox, an envelope with Chloe's name on it, and instructions not to give it to her until she turned 25. David's pulse quickened. "Do you still have it?" Sister Dorothy nodded slowly. "I've been waiting for the right time to give it to her. Chloe's birthday was 3 weeks ago, but she hasn't been back to visit since she took that job in Charleston. She doesn't know about the letter." How could I call her up and say, "By the way, the mother who abandoned you left you a letter 24 years later"? That kind of news needs to be delivered in person, with support and care. David understood. Chloe had spent her entire life wondering about her origins, building walls to protect herself from the pain of not knowing. A letter from her mother could either heal those wounds or tear them wide open. "Sister Dorothy, I know this is asking a lot, but would you be willing to give me that letter, I think Chloe deserves to know the truth about why her mother left her here." The nun studied his face for a long time. Finally, she stood up from her rocking chair. "Come inside, Mr. Lancaster. There are some things you need to see." They walked through the front hall of the orphanage, past walls covered with photographs of children who had found homes over the decades. Sister Dorothy led him to a small office filled with filing cabinets and the comfortable clutter of someone who'd spent a lifetime keeping track of other people's stories. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope, yellowed with age. David's hands shook as he took it, feeling the weight of whatever truth was sealed inside. "There's something else," Sister Dorothy said, her voice gentle but firm. "Something about that last visit, Christmas Eve 2019. The woman." "You're Lauren." She looked very sick, thin in a way that spoke of serious illness, not just grief. And she was different somehow, calmer, like she'd made peace with something. David looked up from the envelope. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that letter might be more than just an explanation, Mr. Lancaster. It might be a goodbye." David's hands trembled as he held the yellowed envelope. The paper felt fragile, like it might crumble at his touch. Written across the front in Lauren's unmistakable handwriting were the words, "For Chloe Anderson, to be opened on her 25th birthday, from someone who loved her more than life itself." Sister Dorothy settled back into her chair, watching David with the patience of someone who'd witnessed countless moments of truth over the years. "Before you open that, there's more you need to know about those visits." David looked up from the envelope, his throat tight. "More. The second time she came, Chloe was about 12. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the children were playing in the yard after church. Your Lauren, if that's who she was, parked at the end of the driveway and watched for over an hour. I could see her through the office window, and I swear she was memorizing every moment. Did Chloe see her?" "No, but..." Sister Dorothy paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. Chloe had been asking questions about her mother that week, wondering out loud what she looked like, whether she was still alive, whether she ever thought about the daughter she'd given up. It was like she could sense something. David's chest tightened. What kind of questions? She wanted to know if I thought her mother had been a good cook. She'd been practicing recipes from that cookbook constantly, like she was trying to connect with someone through the food. Sister Dorothy's voice grew soft. I told her that anyone who could write recipes like that must have had a deep love for feeding people. Chloe smiled and said, "Maybe that's why I love cooking so much. Maybe it's in my blood." The irony was almost too painful to bear. While Chloe had been wondering about her mother, Lauren had been sitting just yards away, probably dying to hold her daughter, but unable to risk the contact. "You said she looked sick the last time," David said. "How sick?" Sister Dorothy's expression grew grave. "Like someone living on borrowed time. She was wearing a scarf. But I could see she'd lost weight, lost hair, when she got out of the car to put the letter in our mailbox. She moved like every step was an effort." David stared down at the envelope again. The address listed below Chloe's name made his blood run cold. The Southern Heirloom Restaurant, 412 King Street, Charleston, SC. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "She knew where I was. She knew exactly where you were." Sister Dorothy confirmed. "That letter isn't just for Chloe, it's for both of you." David's mind raced. If Lauren had known about his restaurant, had known he was still in Charleston, why hadn't she contacted him? Why had she chosen to suffer alone? To let him believe she'd abandoned him for someone else? "Sister Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you think Lauren, the woman who brought Chloe here, do you think she was running from something? Someone?" The nun was quiet for a long moment, her fingers worrying the wooden cross that hung around her neck. "Mr. Lancaster, in 30 years of running this place, I've seen every kind of desperation imaginable. Women fleeing abusive husbands, teenagers with nowhere else to turn, mothers who made impossible choices to keep their children safe." She met his eyes. That woman wasn't just frightened, she was terrified, and the fear wasn't fresh. It was the kind of fear that had been living inside her for a long time. Did she ever say anything about who she was running from? Not directly, but that third visit, when Chloe was about 16, something had changed. The woman seemed more desperate, more urgent. She stayed longer than usual, and I saw her making phone calls from her car. Short conversations, like she was checking in with someone or reporting her location. David felt sick. The picture Sister Dorothy was painting was one of a woman living in captivity. Allowed brief glimpses of freedom only under strict supervision. You think someone was controlling her movements. I think someone was controlling her entire life. Sister Dorothy leaned forward. Mr. Lancaster, whatever's in that letter, you need to prepare yourself. I don't think this story has a happy ending. David nodded, his hands steadying as resolve replaced shock. Whatever Lauren had endured, whatever had kept her from coming home, he owed it to her, and to Chloe, to finally understand the truth. Would you mind if I open this here, I think? I think I might need someone with me when I read it. Of course. David carefully opened the envelope, revealing several pages of Lauren's handwriting. The ink was faded but still legible, and he could see tear stains on the paper, whether from when she'd written it or from his own eyes. He couldn't tell. He began to read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. My dearest Chloe, if you're reading this, it means you've reached your 25th birthday and hopefully found the courage to seek out the truth about your past. I pray that you've also found your father, David Lancaster, the most honorable man I've ever known, and the only person I've ever loved with my whole heart. David's voice cracked. Voice? Sister Dorothy reached over and squeezed his free hand. I need you to know that leaving you at St. Catherine's was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the only way to keep you safe. Your father doesn't know you exist, and that's my fault, not his. I never got the chance to tell him I was pregnant before I was taken away. Taken away, David repeated, the words like glass in his throat. I can't tell you everything in this letter. It's too dangerous even now, but I need you to know that every day I've been apart from you, and David has been agony. Not a moment has passed that I haven't thought about both of you, haven't dreamed about the life we should have had together. David had to stop reading. The room was spinning, and he felt like he couldn't breathe. 25 years of anger, of feeling abandoned and betrayed, were crumbling around him. Lauren hadn't left him. She'd been taken. Take your time, Sister Dorothy said gently. After a few minutes, David continued, Chloe, you have your father's strength and my stubborn streak. The cookbook I left with you contains all the recipes we used to make together, back when our biggest worry was whether to use andouille or tasso in the jambalaya. Every recipe marked with a heart is one we perfected side by side, laughing and tasting and dreaming about the restaurant we'd open together someday. David remembered those dreams. He and Lauren had spent hours planning their future, sketching restaurant layouts on napkins, arguing good-naturedly about menu items and decor. The Southern Heirloom had been their shared vision, but he'd built it alone, carrying her memory in every dish he'd ever served. I know this is asking the impossible, but please don't hate me for the choices I made. I stayed away to protect you both, even though it meant sacrificing my own happiness. The man who took me made it clear that any attempt to return to David, any contact with either of you, would result in David's death. I couldn't risk that. I loved him too much to put him in danger. Someone threatened to kill you, David said, looking up at Sister Dorothy. Someone kept her away by threatening my life. The nun's face was pale. Who would do such a thing? David thought about Charleston's restaurant scene 25 years ago, about the competitors who'd tried to drive him out of business in the early days. Most of it had been typical industry rivalry, poaching staff, undercutting prices, spreading rumors. But there had been one name that always came up when things got particularly nasty. Alan Whitman, he said quietly. Sister Dorothy frowned. Who? He owned a chain of restaurants back then, higher-end places, lots of money behind them. He tried to buy me out several times in the first few years after Lauren disappeared. When I wouldn't sell, things got unpleasant. Health inspectors showing up constantly, suppliers suddenly unable to fulfill orders, that kind of thing. You think he was involved in Lauren's disappearance? David looked back at the letter, his mind racing. Alan Whitman had been persistent, almost obsessive. About acquiring David's restaurant, He'd claimed it was just business, but there had always been something personal in his approach, something that went beyond normal competition. "I need to finish reading this," David said. "The address I've written below will lead you to David. He owns a restaurant now. Our restaurant. The one we used to dream about. Find him. Chloe. Tell him that I never stopped loving him. That every recipe I taught you was a love letter I couldn't send. Cook with him. Laugh with him. Be the family we should have been." David's vision blurred as he read the final paragraph. "I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm not afraid anymore. My only regret is that I won't be there to see you two find each other. Take care of him, sweetheart. He's going to need time to forgive himself for not finding us. But that was never his fault. It was mine for not being brave enough to trust that love could conquer everything. All my love, always and forever. Your mother, Lauren." The silence that followed was profound. David sat holding the letter, tears streaming down his face while Sister Dorothy waited patiently for him to process what he'd just learned. Finally, he looked up. "She's dead, isn't she?" Sister Dorothy nodded sadly. "I believe so. That last visit, Christmas Eve 2019, she looked like someone saying goodbye. And Chloe doesn't know any of this. Not unless you tell her." David folded the letter carefully, his hands steady now. Despite the chaos in his heart, he had answers finally, but they came with a burden he wasn't sure how to bear. How do you tell someone that their mother spent 25 years as a prisoner? How do you explain that love sometimes means letting go of everything you hold dear? "Sister Dorothy, I need to ask one more favor. Anything. Will you come with me when I tell Chloe? She's going to need someone who knew her as a child. Someone who can help her understand that she was loved even when she felt abandoned." Sister Dorothy smiled through her own tears. "Mr. Lancaster, I've been waiting 25 years to see this family reunited. I wouldn't miss it for the world." The drive back to Charleston felt like traveling through a nightmare. David's hands gripped the steering wheel as Sister Dorothy sat beside him, Lauren's letter safely tucked in her purse. They'd agreed that Dorothy should be the one to hold it until they faced Chloe together. David didn't trust himself not to break down completely if he had to read those words again. "Tell me about Alan Whitman," Sister Dorothy said as they passed through a small town lined with pecan trees. "What kind of man was he?" David's jaw tightened. "The kind who didn't understand the word no. When I first opened the Southern Heirloom, he made an offer to buy me out within the first month. When I refused, he kept coming back with higher numbers, like he couldn't comprehend that someone might not want to sell to him. That doesn't sound like enough to justify kidnapping someone. It wasn't just business rivalry." David's voice grew dark with memory. He had this obsession with authenticity. With owning the real Southern cooking experience, he used to come into my restaurant and quiz Lauren about her techniques, asking where she'd learned to cook, who had taught her family recipes. It made her uncomfortable, but I thought he was just being thorough about his competition research. Sister Dorothy frowned. How did Lauren react to his attention? She hated it. Said he looked at her like she was something he wanted to possess rather than a person. David's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The last few weeks before she disappeared, she mentioned seeing him around town more often, at the grocery store. Outside her apartment, near the restaurant during her off hours, I told her she was being paranoid. The admission hung between them like an accusation. David had failed to protect the woman he loved because he hadn't taken her fears seriously. Now he was learning that her instincts had been devastatingly accurate. "David, you couldn't have known. Couldn't I?" She was scared, and I dismissed it. She tried to tell me something was wrong, and I told her it was just business competition. His voice cracked. "What kind of man does that make me?" "The kind who's about to get a second chance to protect his family," Sister Dorothy said firmly. "Lauren made her choices to keep you safe. Don't dishonor that sacrifice by drowning in guilt." They drove in silence for a while, the weight of revelation settling between them. As they approached the outskirts of Charleston, David's phone buzzed with a text from Rose. "Where are you? Chloe's been asking questions all day. She knows something's up." David showed the message to Sister Dorothy. "We need to be careful about how we handle this. Chloe spent her entire life building walls to protect herself from disappointment. Then we'll be gentle," Dorothy replied. "But David, she deserves to know the truth about her mother. And more importantly, she deserves to know she has a father who's going to love and protect her." The Southern Heirloom was busy with the dinner crowd when they arrived. David led Sister Dorothy through the back entrance, past the prep kitchen where tomorrow's vegetables were being chopped and sauces were simmering for the evening service. "David," Rose appeared from the walk-in cooler, her arms full of fresh herbs. "Thank God you're back. That girl has been driving herself crazy wondering where you went." She stopped short when she saw Sister Dorothy. "And you are?" "Sister Dorothy from St. Catherine's home," Dorothy said, extending her hand. "I think we need to talk about Chloe Anderson." Rose's eyes widened with understanding. "Oh, Jesus, it's true, isn't it? She really is." "Where is she?" David asked. "Gumbo Station." "Same as always, but David, she's been off all day, distracted, asking everyone if they've seen you. Checking her phone constantly." Rose lowered her voice. "I think she's figured out that your sudden disappearance has something to do with her." David peered through the pass-through window into the main kitchen. There was Chloe, stirring a massive pot of gumbo with her characteristic left-handed circular motions. But her usual grace was absent. Her movements were tense, mechanical, like she was going through the motions while her mind was elsewhere. "How do we do this?" he asked Sister Dorothy. "Carefully, honestly, and together." Dorothy adjusted her purse strap, feeling the weight of Lauren's letter inside. She's going to have questions we can't answer, and she's going to be angry about things that aren't our fault. But she needs to know that she's not alone anymore. David nodded, steeling himself for what might be the most important conversation of his life. He walked into the kitchen, Sister Dorothy following close behind. "Chloe, can I see you in my office for a minute?" She looked up from the gumbo, her dark eyes immediately suspicious. "Is everything okay? You disappeared this morning without saying anything, and Rose has been acting weird all day. It's complicated. But yes, it's going to be okay." David gestured toward Sister Dorothy. "This is Sister Dorothy. She has some information about your past that I think you need to hear." Chloe's face went pale. She looked between David and Dorothy, her expression cycling through confusion, hope, and fear. "Information about my past. What kind of information?" "The kind that's going to change everything," David said gently. "Can we sit down?" Chloe turned off the burner under her gumbo and followed them to the small office. The space felt even more cramped with 3 people, but it was private, away from the curious eyes and ears of the kitchen staff. "Chloe," Sister Dorothy began, her voice warm but serious. "Do you remember me?" "Should I?" Chloe's defensive walls were going up fast. "I've been the director of St. Catherine's home for 30 years. I was there the night you were brought to us as a baby." Dorothy reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver necklace with a garlic charm. "This was with you when you arrived. I've been keeping it safe." Chloe's hands shook as she took the necklace. "This was my mother's." "Yes, along with the cookbook and some other things." Dorothy paused, choosing her words carefully. "Chloe, your mother didn't abandon you because she didn't want you. She left you with us because it was the only way to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" David stepped forward. "From the same person who took her away from me." Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto David's face. "What are you talking about? Your mother's name was Lauren Sinclair. We were together for 2 years, and we were planning to get married. 25 years ago this morning, she disappeared from my life without explanation." David's voice was steady, but his hands were trembling. "I never knew she was pregnant. I never knew about you." The silence in the office was deafening. Chloe stared at David like he was speaking a foreign language, her mind clearly struggling to process what she was hearing. "You're saying," she began slowly, "you're saying you think you're my father. I'm saying, I know I'm your father." David's voice broke slightly. "You have Lauren's eyes, her smile, her way of moving around a kitchen. You cook with techniques she guarded like family secrets. You hum the same song she used to sing. But that's impossible. If you were my father, why didn't you look for me? Why didn't you try to find out what happened to her?" Sister Dorothy intervened gently. "Because he didn't know you existed, sweetheart. And because your mother made sure he couldn't find her." "What do you mean?" Dorothy pulled Lauren's letter from her purse. "Your mother left this for you. She wanted you to have it when you turned 25, along with your father's address." She handed the yellowed envelope to Chloe. "She was hoping you'd be brave enough to find him when you were ready." Chloe took the letter with shaking hands, staring at her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. "This is from her, from my mother." "Read it," David said softly. "But Chloe, you need to prepare yourself. The truth about why your mother left you, why she never came back. It's not what either of us thought." Chloe opened the envelope and began to read. David watched her face change as she absorbed Lauren's words. Confusion giving way to understanding, then to horror, then to a grief so profound it was painful to witness. "She was kidnapped," Chloe whispered. "Someone took her and kept her prisoner for 25 years. We think so, yes. And this man, Alan Whitman, he threatened to kill you if she tried to come back." David nodded. "I remember him. He was obsessed with buying my restaurant, with possessing things he thought represented authentic Southern culture. I think that obsession extended to your mother." Chloe looked up from the letter, tears streaming down her face. "She died alone. She died without ever holding me, without ever seeing us together. But she died knowing that someday we'd find each other," David said, moving closer. "She died believing that love would win in the end. How can you be sure? How can you be sure that this letter is real? That any of this is true?" Sister Dorothy reached out and touched Chloe's hand. "Because I was there, sweetheart. I saw her leave you on our doorstep 25 years ago. I watched her come back 3 times over the years just to see you from a distance. I held this letter while she told me to wait until you were old enough to understand." Chloe looked between David and Dorothy, her entire world reshaping itself around truths she'd never imagined. "So, you're really my father, and my mother was really Lauren Sinclair." "Yes, and she really loved us both, more than life itself," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "She sacrificed everything to keep us safe." Chloe stood up abruptly, the letter clutched in her hands. "I need air. I need to think. This is too much. Too fast." "Chloe, wait." But she was already pushing past them, heading for the back door of the restaurant. David started to follow, but Sister Dorothy caught his arm. "Let her process this," she said gently. 25 years of questions just got answered all at once. She needs time." David sank into his chair, emotionally drained. "What if she doesn't come back? What if this is too much for her to handle? Then we'll give her space until she's ready," Dorothy replied. "But David, that girl has been searching for her family her entire life. She'll come back. The question is whether you'll be ready to be the father she needs when she does." Through the office window, David could see the kitchen staff continuing their evening prep, unaware that the world had just shifted on its axis. Somewhere out there, Chloe was trying to reconcile 25 years of wondering with the devastating truth about her origins. And somewhere else, if Sister Dorothy was right, Alan Whitman was still alive, still free, still believing he'd gotten away with destroying 3 lives for the sake of his twisted obsessions. But not anymore. David had his daughter back, and he had answers about Lauren's fate. Now it was time to make sure that justice was finally served. Chloe didn't come back that night. David spent the evening pacing his apartment, checking his phone every few minutes for a text that never came. Sister Dorothy had taken a room at a nearby hotel, insisting she'd stay in Charleston until Chloe was ready to talk. Rose had closed the restaurant and sat with David until nearly midnight, both of them staring at the silent phone on his kitchen table. "She'll come around," Rose kept saying. "That girl's got backbone. She just needs time to sort through everything." But David wasn't so sure. He'd watched Chloe's face when she'd read Lauren's letter, seen the way her whole world had cracked open and rearranged itself in the span of a few minutes. 25 years of questions answered, but at what cost? The next morning brought gray skies, and the kind of coastal drizzle that made everything feel heavy and uncertain. David arrived at the Southern Heirloom early, hoping work might distract him from the hollow ache in his chest. He'd found his daughter only to lose her again in the same day. He was surprised to find the back door already unlocked and the kitchen lights on. Moving quietly through the prep area, he followed the sound of gentle humming toward the gumbo station. There was Chloe, stirring a pot with her characteristic left-handed movements, but something was different. She was wearing the silver necklace with the garlic charm, and Lauren's cookbook lay open beside her on the steel counter. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but her movements were sure and steady. "You're early," David said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Chloe gestured to the cookbook with her free hand. "I stayed up all night reading this. Every recipe, every little note in the margins." Her voice was rough with exhaustion and emotion. "She wrote my name next to some of them. For Chloe when she's old enough to understand the difference between paprika and cayenne. Chloe's first birthday cake. If I ever get to make it for her. David moved closer, his heart breaking at the pain in her voice. She never stopped thinking about you. I know. I can see it in every page. Chloe turned to face him fully. The recipes marked with hearts. Those were yours together, weren't they? Yes, we used to spend Sunday mornings cooking together, trying new combinations, arguing about whether to use okra or filet in the gumbo. David smiled despite his pain. She always won those arguments. And this one, Chloe pointed to a recipe for praline bread pudding, the page worn soft from handling. This one has both your initials and mine, DL plus LS plus C. David leaned over to look. He remembered that recipe. They'd developed it together for a Valentine's Day special, back when they'd thought they had all the time in the world. Seeing his and Lauren's initials linked with Chloe's, written in Lauren's careful script, made his throat tight. She was planning for all three of us, he said quietly. Yeah, Chloe's voice broke slightly. She was making space for me in your life before I was even born. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared grief and newfound connection settling between them. Then Chloe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked directly at David. I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Anything. Do you want this? Really want this? Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way that reminded David of the frightened woman who'd left her baby on an orphanage doorstep 25 years ago. Because I've spent my whole life being the kid nobody really wanted to keep. Foster families who sent me back. Potential adoptive parents who changed their minds. I can't go through that again. David's heart shattered. Without thinking, he reached out and pulled Chloe into a hug. Tentative at first, then stronger when she didn't pull away. Chloe, I have wanted you every single day for 25 years without even knowing you existed. His voice was muffled against her hair. Your mother and I, we talked about children. We talked. We planned for them. We dreamed about teaching our kids to cook, about passing down family recipes and traditions. When she disappeared, I thought those dreams died with her. Chloe was crying now, her shoulders shaking against his chest. I used to pretend that my parents were looking for me, that somewhere out there, someone was missing me as much as I was missing them. Someone was. We both were. We just didn't know it. They held each other in the empty kitchen while the gumbo simmered and the morning light grew stronger outside. Finally, Chloe pulled back, wiping her eyes but leaving her hands on David's arms. So, what happens now? How do we do this? I don't know how to be someone's daughter, and I don't know how to be someone's father, David admitted. But maybe we can figure it out together. Sister Dorothy said she'd stay a few more days if we wanted to talk to her more. She has stories about my childhood, about the times my mother came to visit. I'd like that. I'd like to know what you were like as a kid. Chloe smiled through her tears. Stubborn, according to Sister Dorothy, and obsessed with cooking even as a toddler. She said I used to steal spoons from the kitchen and pretend to stir imaginary pots. Definitely your mother's daughter. And yours too. Apparently, Chloe looked down at the cookbook. David, can I call you David for now? Dad feels too big, too new. Call me whatever feels right, we've got time. David then, I want to cook with you. I want to make some of these recipes marked with hearts. I want to understand what you and my mother had together. David felt tears pricking his eyes again. Are you sure? Some of those memories are going to be hard. I've spent 25 years wondering about my parents. Hard memories are still memories. They're still pieces of the puzzle I've been trying to solve my whole life. Rose chose that moment to arrive for her shift, stopping short when she saw David and Chloe standing together by the gumbo station. Her face broke into a smile that was equal parts relief and joy. Well, it's about damn time, she said, setting down her purse and crossing to hug them both. I was starting to think you two were going to dance around each other forever. Rose, David said, his arms still around Chloe's shoulders. I'd like you to officially meet my daughter, Chloe. Honey, I've known who she was since the first day she walked into this kitchen, Rose said, squeezing Chloe's hand. You've got your mama's way of seasoning and your daddy's stubborn streak. It was just a matter of time before they figured it out. You knew? Chloe asked, astonished. Sweetheart, I worked with Lauren for 2 years. I know her techniques like I know my own name. When you showed up cooking exactly like her, humming her songs, moving around a kitchen like you owned it, Well, it didn't take a genius to connect the dots. Why didn't you say anything? Rose looked between David and Chloe with the fond exasperation of someone who'd spent years watching people complicate simple truths. Because some things have to be discovered, not announced. You two needed to find each other naturally, not because some old woman told you to. She paused, her expression growing more serious. Besides, there was always the chance I was wrong. And if I was wrong, telling you about it would have just caused more pain. David understood. Rose had been protecting all of them in her own way, letting the truth emerge organically instead of forcing a reunion that might not have taken. So what's the plan? Rose asked. Are we cooking today? Or are we standing around crying all morning? Chloe laughed, the sound bright and genuine despite her red eyes. We're cooking. David's going to teach me how to make the jambalaya marked with a heart in my mother's cookbook. Our mother's cookbook, David corrected gently. And it's not just marked with a heart. It's marked with the date we perfected the recipe. February 14th, 1999. 2 weeks before you were conceived. The words hung in the air between them. Heavy with implication, Lauren had been pregnant when she'd written that final note in her cookbook. She'd been carrying Chloe when she'd planned their future together, when she'd dreamed of the family they'd become. Then let's make it exactly the way she would have wanted, Chloe said, opening the cookbook to the marked page. Let's cook together the way you two never got the chance to cook with me. As they gathered ingredients and prepped vegetables, David found himself watching Chloe with wonder. Every gesture, every movement, carried echoes of Lauren. But there were new things too. A confidence that Lauren had sometimes lacked. A resilience born of surviving loss and disappointment. Tell me about her, Chloe said as she diced onions with professional precision. Not just the cooking stuff. What made her laugh? What did she dream about? David smiled, his hand steady as he cleaned the shrimp. She had this laugh that started as a giggle and turned into a snort if something was really funny. She was embarrassed by it, but I loved it. And she dreamed about traveling to Louisiana, learning from the old Creole cooks in New Orleans. She wanted to understand the roots of every dish she made. Did she ever get to go? No. We were planning a trip for the summer after we got married. David's voice caught slightly. She had it all mapped out, which restaurants to visit, which chefs to talk to. She was going to document everything in a new cookbook. Chloe was quiet for a moment, her knife moving in steady rhythm. Maybe we could go someday, you and me. We could finish the research she started. I'd like that, David said. I'd like that very much. As they cooked together, adding rice and stock and spices in the precise proportions Lauren had perfected, David felt something he hadn't experienced in 25 years. Wholeness. The missing piece of his heart was slowly clicking into place, and for the first time since Lauren's disappearance, he could imagine a future that included joy instead of just survival. But even as they laughed and shared stories, even as the jambalaya came together perfectly under their combined efforts, David couldn't shake the knowledge that their reunion was built on tragedy. Lauren was dead and somewhere out there, and the man responsible for her suffering was living free. That couldn't stand. Not anymore. 3 days had passed since David and Chloe's tearful reunion in the kitchen. 3 days of cooking together, sharing stories, and slowly building the foundation of a relationship that should have existed for 25 years. Sister Dorothy had extended her stay, spending her afternoons with Chloe, filling in the gaps of childhood memories with gentle stories and patient answers to questions that had haunted Chloe her entire life. David was reviewing invoices in his office when Rose knocked on the doorframe, her expression troubled. David, there's someone here to see you. Says he's an old friend, but something about him gives me the creeps. David looked up from his paperwork. What's his name? Alan Whitman. He's sitting at table 12, nursing a bourbon and watching the kitchen like he's conducting surveillance. The blood drained from David's face. After everything they'd learned about Lauren's disappearance, hearing that name felt like ice water in his veins. How long has he been here? About 20 minutes. He came in during the lunch lull, ordered the most expensive bourbon we have, and has been sitting there ever since. David, he's been asking questions about our staff. What kind of questions? About the new cook. About where she came from, how long she's been here, whether she has any family in the area. Rose's voice dropped to a whisper. He knows something, David. I can feel it. David's mind raced. If Alan Whitman was here, if he was asking about Chloe, then the nightmare wasn't over. The man who had destroyed Lauren's life was now sniffing around his daughter. Where's Chloe? Prep kitchen. Working on tomorrow's roux. She's been back there for an hour. Good. Keep her there. Don't let her come out front for any reason. David stood up, his jaw set with determination. I'm going to go have a conversation with an old friend. Alan Whitman looked exactly like David remembered. Tall, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He'd aged well, carrying his 70 years with the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences for his actions. When he saw David approaching, his smile widened into something that might have been genuine pleasure if you didn't know better. David Lancaster, Alan said, rising to shake hands. You look good, my friend. Success suits you. David didn't take the offered hand. Alan, it's been a long time. Too long, too long. Alan settled back into his chair, gesturing for David to join him. I was just telling your lovely manager how impressed I am with what you've built here. The Southern Heirloom has quite the reputation these days. What do you want, Alan? Straight to business, I see. I always admired that about you. Alan took a sip of his bourbon, savoring it like fine wine. I'm here because I've heard some interesting rumors. Word on the street is that you've hired a new cook. Someone with exceptional talent, particularly with traditional Southern cuisine. David's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. We hire a lot of cooks. What's your interest? Well, you know how I've always been passionate about authenticity, finding real talent, people who understand the soul of Southern cooking. Alan's eyes glittered with something that made David's skin crawl. I'd be very interested in meeting this new addition to your staff. I'm afraid that's not possible. We don't allow our kitchen staff to be poached by competitors. Alan laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Poached, David. You wound me. I'm simply a connoisseur appreciating fine craftsmanship. I understand this young woman has a particular gift with gumbo. Very traditional techniques, I'm told. The specificity of the comment confirmed David's worst fears. Alan wasn't here by coincidence. He knew about Chloe, knew about her cooking style, and worst of all, he probably knew who she was. I think this conversation is over, David said, starting to rise. Sit down, David. Alan's voice carried a subtle threat that made David freeze. We're not done talking. David slowly sat back down, every muscle in his body coiled for action. Around them, the restaurant continued its normal lunch service, oblivious to the predator sitting at table 12. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the old days lately, Alan continued conversationally, about the challenges we faced as young entrepreneurs, the competition, the complications that sometimes arose. What complications? Oh, you know, staff issues, people leaving unexpectedly, that sort of thing. Alan's smile was razor sharp. I remember you had a particular problem with that. A talented young cook who disappeared one day without so much as a goodbye. Lauren something, wasn't it? David's hands clenched into fists under the table. Her name was Lauren Sinclair. Ah, yes, Lauren, lovely girl. Very skilled with traditional techniques. Such a shame she vanished like that. Alan paused, watching David's face carefully. I wonder whatever happened to her. I think you know exactly what happened to her. Do I? Alan's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. David, you sound almost accusatory. Surely you don't think I had anything to do with poor Lauren's departure. The way he said the word departure made David want to reach across the table and strangle him, but he forced himself to remain calm, to think strategically. If Alan was here, if he was making veiled threats, then he was revealing his hand, and that meant David could finally start building a case against him. What do you want, Alan? Really, I want to meet your new cook, the one with such remarkably familiar techniques. Alan leaned forward slightly. I think we might have a great deal to discuss. And if I refuse, well, that would be unfortunate for everyone involved. Alan's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath the polished exterior. You see, David, I've built quite an empire over the past 25 years. Multiple restaurants, significant political connections, the kind of influence that can make life very difficult for small business owners who don't play nicely. The threat was clear, but there was something else in Alan's tone. Desperation, maybe, or hunger. the same obsessive quality that had driven him to pursue Lauren all those years ago. Health inspectors can be so thorough when they want to be, Alan continued. Suppliers can become unreliable. Staff can be poached by competitors offering better opportunities. It would be such a shame if the Southern Heirloom faced those kinds of challenges. David stood up slowly, his decision made. You need to leave now. Oh, I don't think so. I haven't finished my bourbon. Alan's smile returned, predatory and confident. Besides, I'm hoping to catch a glimpse of this mysterious new cook of yours. Perhaps when she comes out to check on the dining room. That's not going to happen, isn't it? Alan checked his expensive watch. It's almost 2 o'clock. Don't most kitchens do a mid-afternoon check on customer satisfaction around this time? The specificity of his knowledge about restaurant operations, about Chloe's likely schedule, sent a chill down David's spine. Alan had been watching them, studying their routines, preparing for this moment. Security! David called out, his voice carrying across the dining room, but Alan just laughed. Really, David? You're going to have me thrown out for enjoying a drink and making conversation? What will your other customers think? Before David could respond, he heard a familiar voice from the kitchen pass. Chef, the roux for tomorrow's special is ready for your approval. Chloe appeared in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes swept the dining room casually until they landed on Alan, and David saw her entire body go rigid. Well, well, Alan said, his voice full of satisfaction. There she is. Chloe stood frozen, staring at Alan with an expression of pure terror. Not confusion, not surprise. Terror, like she was looking at a monster from her worst nightmares. You know him, David said, his voice barely a whisper. Chloe nodded slowly, her face pale as paper. He used to come to the orphanage sometimes, when I was little. He would ask Sister Dorothy about the children, about our backgrounds, about which ones showed particular talents. Alan's smile widened. Such a bright girl, always so talented, even as a child. You've been watching her, David said, the pieces clicking into place. All these years, you've been keeping track of her. I've been keeping track of many things, David. It pays to be thorough. Alan finished his bourbon and set the glass down with deliberate precision. Now, shall we discuss business? I have a proposition that I think will benefit everyone involved. The answer is no. Whatever you're selling, we're not buying. Oh, but you haven't heard my offer yet. Alan stood up, straightening his expensive suit jacket. You see, I've recently acquired several new restaurant properties. High-end establishments that cater to a very exclusive clientele. I'm in need of a chef who understands authentic Southern cuisine, someone with traditional training. He looked directly at Chloe as he spoke, and David saw her flinch. Someone like your mother, Alan continued, his voice soft but carrying clearly across the quiet dining room. Someone who understands that certain recipes, certain techniques are meant to be preserved and protected by those who truly appreciate their value. Get out, David said, his voice deadly quiet. I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, I've waited 25 years for this moment. 25 years of watching and waiting and planning. Alan's facade of civility finally cracked completely. That girl belongs with me, David. Just like her mother should have belonged with me. Some things are destiny. That's when David knew with absolute certainty that they were all in mortal danger. Alan Whitman wasn't just a competitor or a business rival. He was a predator who had spent a quarter-century obsessing over Lauren and her daughter. And now, he was ready to complete whatever twisted plan he'd been nurturing all these years. Chloe, go back to the kitchen, David said, without taking his eyes off Alan. Call the police. But Alan just laughed. The police? On what grounds? I'm a respected businessman having a drink in a public restaurant. What crime have I committed? We'll start with kidnapping and work our way up from there. Kidnapping, my dear David. You'll need proof for accusations like that. And proof can be such a difficult thing to come by, especially when it's been carefully managed for so many years. Alan headed toward the door, pausing to look back at both David and Chloe. I'll be in touch, he said. We have so much to discuss, and I'm not a patient man anymore. 25 years is long enough to wait for what's mine. After he left, the restaurant felt like a crime scene. David rushed to Chloe, who was still standing frozen in the kitchen doorway. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "David, I think he's the one who took my mother." "I know," David said, pulling her into his arms. "But this time we're going to stop him." The police had been sympathetic, but ultimately useless. Detective Rodriguez, a tired-looking man in his 50s, had listened patiently to David's story about Alan Whitman, taken notes about the veiled threats, and promised to look into it. But as he'd explained with the weary tone of someone who delivered bad news countless times before, having a drink in a restaurant and making uncomfortable conversation wasn't a crime. "You need concrete evidence," he'd told David. "Something more than suspicions and 25-year-old theories about a missing person case that was never officially opened." Now, 3 days after Alan's visit, David was second-guessing every decision. He'd hired private security for the restaurant, installed new cameras, and made sure Chloe was never alone. But the waiting was killing him. Alan Whitman was out there somewhere, planning his next move, and David felt like he was playing defense in a game where he didn't know the rules. "You're driving yourself crazy," Rose said, finding David pacing in his office for the 3rd time that morning. "And you're making everyone else nervous too." "Good. They should be nervous. That man is dangerous. I'm not arguing with you about that, but David, you can't protect Chloe by keeping her locked up in the kitchen forever. She's a grown woman and she's tougher than you think." David looked through the office window at the dining room. Where the Friday night crowd was settling in for dinner service, the Southern Heirloom was busier than ever. Word of mouth about their new chef's traditional techniques had spread through Charleston's food scene like wildfire. Ironic that Alan's obsession with authentic Southern cooking was exactly what was drawing attention to Chloe's talents. Has she said anything more about remembering him from the orphanage? A little. She told Sister Dorothy that he used to show up around Christmas every few years, always with expensive gifts for the children. But he would ask specific questions about their backgrounds, their talents, their family histories. Rose's expression darkened. Dorothy said he seemed particularly interested in children who had been abandoned as babies, especially girls. David's stomach turned. Jesus Christ. How many others do you think there were? "I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to find out." Rose sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. "David, I've been thinking about this whole situation, and I keep coming back to one question. Why now? Why did Alan wait 25 years to make his move? Maybe he didn't know Chloe was in Charleston until recently. Or maybe something changed. Maybe Lauren's death freed him up somehow." Rose leaned forward. "Think about it. If he was keeping her prisoner all these years, her death would have been like losing his most prized possession. He'd need a replacement." The thought made David's blood run cold. Alan hadn't just been waiting for Chloe to grow up. He'd been planning to continue the cycle of obsession and captivity that had destroyed Lauren's life. A knock on the office door interrupted his dark thoughts. Marcus, their sous chef, stuck his head in with an expression of barely controlled excitement. "Chef, you need to see this. We've got a situation in the dining room." David followed Marcus out to the pass, where he could see into the main dining area. At table 8, a familiar figure sat alone, dressed in an expensive dark suit and studying the menu with the intensity of a scholar reviewing ancient texts. Alan Whitman had returned. "How long has he been here?" David asked. "About 10 minutes. He specifically requested table 8. Said he wanted to be able to see the kitchen." Marcus lowered his voice. "Chef, the guy gives me the creeps. He keeps asking our server about the evening specials, about which dishes showcase our traditional techniques." David's jaw tightened. Alan was making a show of being a regular customer, but his real purpose was obvious. He was studying the kitchen, learning their routines, figuring out the best way to get close to Chloe. "Where is she?" "Sauce station, working on the evening's gumbo." Marcus hesitated. "Chef, she doesn't know he's here yet. Should I tell her?" "No, keep her focused on her work. And Marcus, make sure the rest of the kitchen staff knows to keep the pass clear. I don't want anyone going in or out of the dining room unnecessarily." David straightened his chef's coat and walked into the dining room with the confidence of a man defending his territory. Alan looked up as he approached, that same predatory smile spreading across his face. "David, what excellent timing. I was just about to order the gumbo. I understand your new chef has quite the gift for it. We're fully booked tonight, Alan. I'm afraid we can't accommodate walk-ins." "Oh, but I made a reservation. Under the name Sinclair." Alan's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. Surely you wouldn't turn away a customer with such an appropriate name. The use of Lauren's surname was like a slap in the face. David felt his hands clench into fists, but he forced himself to remain professional. They were in a crowded restaurant with witnesses. Alan was counting on that to protect him. What do you want? I want to enjoy a meal at Charleston's finest establishment. Is that so unreasonable? Alan gestured to the empty chair across from him. Please, sit. Let's discuss business like civilized men. Against every instinct screaming in his head, David sat down. Better to keep Alan talking, to understand his game plan, than to let him sit here studying the kitchen in silence. You know, I've been doing some research since our last conversation, Alan said conversationally. Very interesting family history you've uncovered. A daughter you never knew you had, raised in the same orphanage where I used to volunteer my time and resources. You never volunteered anywhere in your life unless there was something in it for you. How cynical. Though I suppose given recent revelations about your personal life, some cynicism is understandable. Alan picked up his water glass, turning it slowly in his hands. Tell me, David, how did it feel to discover that the woman you loved spent 25 years knowing exactly where you were but never attempting contact? David's chest tightened, but he refused to take the bait. Lauren did what she had to do to protect her daughter. Protect her from what? From whom? Alan's voice was silk over steel. From a man who appreciated her talents, who could have given her opportunities she never dreamed of. From a man who kidnapped her and held her prisoner for half her life. Alan's laugh was genuinely amused. Kidnapped, such a harsh word for what was simply a business arrangement. Lauren worked for me, David. She was an employee, not a prisoner. An employee who was afraid to leave. An employee who was threatened. An employee who understood the value of loyalty and discretion. Alan leaned forward slightly. You see, David, some people are meant for greatness, and some people are meant to serve greatness. Lauren served admirably, but she was never quite satisfied with her role, always looking backward, always pining for something she could never have again. The casual cruelty in Alan's voice was breathtaking. He was talking about Lauren like she'd been a prized racehorse, valuable for her abilities but ultimately disposable. Where is she buried? David asked quietly. Who says she's buried anywhere? Alan's smile widened. Perhaps she simply moved on to other opportunities. She's dead and you killed her. Now you're being dramatic. Lauren died of natural causes. Cancer, if you must know. Very sad, very peaceful. I made sure she had the best medical care available. Alan paused, savoring David's reaction. She asked about you at the end, you know, about both of you. Wondered if you'd ever forgive her for leaving. David wanted to reach across the table and tear Alan's throat out, but something in the man's tone stopped him. There was genuine sadness there, twisted and possessive but real. You loved her, David said, understanding flooding through him. In your sick, controlling way, you actually loved her. I appreciated her. I understood her value in ways you never could. Alan's mask slipped again, revealing the obsession beneath. But Lauren was stubborn. Even after all those years, she never truly accepted her situation, never stopped hoping for rescue that was never coming. So now you want her daughter. I want to complete what Lauren and I started. Chloe has inherited her mother's gifts. But she's young, moldable. She doesn't carry Lauren's baggage, her misplaced loyalties. Alan's eyes found the kitchen pass, where Chloe was visible working at the sauce station. She could be everything her mother should have been. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. The threat was delivered with such casual confidence that it sent ice through David's veins. You see, David, I've spent 25 years building something magnificent. Multiple restaurants, political connections, enough money and influence to make problems disappear. One small restaurant owner who gets in my way, that's barely an inconvenience. Before David could respond, their server approached the table with a nervous smile. Excuse me, gentlemen, but the kitchen wanted me to tell you that tonight's gumbo special is ready. Would you like to try a sample? Alan's eyes lit up with anticipation. Yes, I would very much like to try the gumbo, but I have a special request. He looked directly at David. I'd like the chef to present it personally. I'm something of a connoisseur, and I always prefer to compliment the artist directly. David's blood went cold. Alan wasn't just ordering dinner. He was demanding access to Chloe. I'm afraid that's not our policy. Oh, but I insist, in fact. I'm willing to make it worth your while. Alan reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Shall we say $50,000 for a brief conversation with your talented young chef? Just a few minutes to discuss technique and tradition." The envelope hit the table with a soft thud, and David could see the edges of $100 bills inside. Around them, other diners continued their meals, oblivious to the negotiation taking place. "What makes you think she'd want to talk to you?" "Oh, I think she'll be very interested in what I have to say. You see, I have something that belongs to her, something her mother left specifically for her before she died." Alan reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. Tarnished with age but unmistakably valuable, he set it on the table next to the money. Lauren wanted Chloe to have this, her final gift to the daughter she never got to know. Alan's smile was pure poison. "All she has to do is come out here and claim it." David stared at the silver locket, his mind racing. The piece was clearly old, with intricate engravings that spoke of family history and sentimental value. But more importantly, he could see the pain that flashed across Alan's face when he looked at it. The genuine grief of someone who had lost something precious. "That's not yours to give," David said quietly. "Isn't it? I was with Lauren when she died. I held her hand while she asked me to make sure Chloe received this." Alan's fingers traced the edge of the locket without picking it up. "She made me promise, David. Her dying wish was that her daughter would have this piece of her family's history. And what did you promise in return? That you'd use it to lure Chloe into the same prison you kept her mother in." Alan's expression hardened. Lauren was never a prisoner. She was protected, cherished, given every comfort. All I asked in return was her talent, her presence, her companionship. The word companionship was loaded with implications that made David's stomach turn. But he forced himself to stay focused on the immediate problem. Alan was baiting him, trying to provoke a reaction that would cause a scene and draw Chloe out of the kitchen. "I need to think about your offer," David said, standing up slowly. "Sit down, David." Alan's voice carried a subtle threat. "We're not finished negotiating." "Yes, we are." David picked up the envelope of money and dropped it back on the table. "Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested. This isn't a game." Alan's composure finally cracked, revealing the desperation beneath his polished exterior. "Do you have any idea what I've lost? What I've sacrificed to keep Lauren safe all these years? I gave her everything. Protection, purpose, a place in something greater than herself. You gave her a cage. I gave her love." The words exploded out of Alan with such vehemence that nearby diners turned to stare. He immediately lowered his voice, but his eyes remained wild. 25 years of devotion, of caring for someone who never appreciated what she had, and now she's gone, and I'm supposed to just move on, pretend that everything I built with her doesn't matter. David finally understood. Alan wasn't just a predator seeking a new victim. He was a grieving widower, trying to recreate a relationship that had existed only in his own twisted imagination. The realization made him more dangerous, not less. "Lauren never loved you," David said quietly, "and Chloe never will. We'll see about that." Alan picked up the locket and slipped it back into his pocket. "I'm a patient man, David. I've waited 25 years for the right moment, and I can wait a little longer. But make no mistake, Chloe will come to me eventually. They always do." "Is that what you told yourself about Lauren? That she came to you willingly?" "Lauren understood her situation better than you think. Toward the end, she almost seemed grateful that someone had taken the burden of choice away from her." Alan's smile returned, colder than ever. "Freedom is overrated, David. Most people are happier when someone else makes the difficult decisions for them." Before David could respond, he heard Rose's voice calling his name from the kitchen pass. She was trying to sound casual, but there was urgency in her tone that made his blood pressure spike. "Excuse me," David said, turning away from Alan. "Take your time," Alan replied. "I'll just sit here and enjoy the atmosphere. Perhaps order that gumbo after all." David hurried back to the kitchen, where Rose was waiting with an expression of barely controlled panic. "We have a problem," she whispered. "Chloe's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" "She went to the walk-in cooler about 10 minutes ago to get stock for tomorrow's prep. Marcus went to check on her, and the cooler was empty. Back door's unlocked, and her car's not in the parking lot." David felt the world tilt sideways. "Did anyone see her leave? Did she say anything?" "That's the thing. She left this Rose handed him a hastily scrawled note in Chloe's handwriting. "Gone to get answers. Don't follow me. We'll explain everything later. Key." "Jesus Christ," David breathed. She went to confront him on her own. "Who, Alan?" "But he's sitting right out there." David spun around to look at the dining room. Table 8 was empty. The chair pushed back as if someone had left in a hurry. The envelope of money was gone, but the water glass still held ice cubes. How long ago did she leave? Had to be within the last 5 minutes. I was watching the past the whole time until I went to find her. David's mind raced through possibilities. Chloe was smart, but she was also 25 years old and operating on pure emotion. If she decided to confront Alan directly, she was walking into a trap that had been 25 years in the making. "Call Detective Rodriguez," he told Rose. "Tell him Alan Whitman just kidnapped my daughter." "But David, we don't know that." "I know it." David was already pulling off his chef's coat, heading for the office where he kept his keys. "And I know where he's taken her." David's truck tore through Charleston's evening traffic, running red lights and taking corners at speeds that would have been reckless under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. His daughter, God, how easily that phrase came to him now, was in the hands of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of psychological manipulation and control. The address he was heading to had taken him 15 minutes of frantic internet searching to find. Whitman Hospitality Group maintained its corporate headquarters in a converted mansion on the outskirts of the city, far enough from downtown to provide privacy, but close enough to Charleston's restaurant scene to maintain relevance. As he drove, David tried to think like Chloe. She was impulsive but not stupid. If she'd gone to confront Alan, she wouldn't have done it blindly. She would have had a plan, some strategy for protecting herself. His phone rang, and he answered without looking at the caller ID. "David," Sister Dorothy's voice was tight with worry. "Rose called me, is it true? Has that man taken Chloe?" "I think so. Maybe. I don't know for sure. But she left the restaurant, and so did he. David, listen to me. There's something I didn't tell you before. Something about those visits Alan made to the orphanage." Dorothy's voice was strained. "He didn't just ask questions about the children. He offered to sponsor some of them, special scholarships for kids who showed particular talents." David's blood went cold. "What kind of sponsorships?" "Culinary training, mostly. He said he wanted to help preserve traditional Southern cooking techniques. 3 girls over the years took him up on his offers." Dorothy paused. "None of them ever contacted us again after they left. Jesus Christ, how many others were there?" "I don't know." But David, Chloe always refused his offers, even as a teenager. She said something about him made her skin crawl. She was the only one who ever turned him down. David understood now why Alan had waited so long to make his move. Chloe had been the one who got away, the prize that had eluded him for years. Her refusal had probably only made her more desirable in his twisted mind. "Sister Dorothy, I need you to call the police again. Tell them about the other girls, about the pattern. They need to understand that this isn't just about Chloe." "I will. But David, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to get my daughter back." David pulled into the parking lot of Whitman Hospitality Group just as the sun was setting behind the old mansion. The building was lit from within, and he could see movement in the upper windows. Alan's car was parked near the front entrance, and next to it was Chloe's beat-up Honda Civic. She was here, she was alive, and David was going to make damn sure she stayed that way. He pulled out his phone and quickly typed a text message to Rose. "Found them, Whitman Hospitality Group, 1247 Plantation Road. Send police." Then he turned off the phone and slipped it into his pocket. The front door of the mansion was unlocked, opening into a grand foyer with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. But David barely noticed the opulent decor. His attention was focused on the sounds coming from somewhere deeper in the building. Voices, one of them unmistakably Chloe's. He followed the sound through a maze of hallways until he reached what appeared to be a private dining room. Through the partially open door, he could see Alan and Chloe sitting across from each other at an elegant table set for 2. "Understand that your mother and I had something special," Alan was saying, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone explaining something to a child. "She was more than just an employee to me. She was family." "She was your prisoner," Chloe replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "And you're delusional if you think I'm going to follow in her footsteps." Such harsh words. But I suppose that's to be expected. You've been poisoned against me by people who don't understand our arrangement. Alan reached across the table, but Chloe pulled her hands away. Your mother fought me too, at first, but eventually, she came to appreciate the security I provided. Security? You mean captivity. I mean purpose. Direction. A place in something greater than herself. Alan's voice grew more passionate. Do you have any idea what I could offer you? The restaurants, the opportunities, the chance to preserve and perfect traditions that are dying out in this modern world. I already have a job, I already have a family. David Lancaster is not your family. He's a stranger who happened to share DNA with you. Alan's composure was starting to crack again. I knew your mother for 25 years. I cared for her, protected her, loved her in ways that man never could. You destroyed her life. I saved her life. Alan slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glasses ring. She was wasting her talents in that pathetic little restaurant, cooking for people who couldn't appreciate what they were eating. I gave her a chance to create art, to work with ingredients most chefs can only dream of. David had heard enough. He pushed through the door and stepped into the dining room, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Hello, Alan. I think it's time for this conversation to end. Alan's face lit up with genuine pleasure as David entered the dining room, as if his arrival had been expected and welcomed. David, perfect timing. Chloe and I were just discussing her future. Please, join us. Alan gestured to an empty chair that had been waiting at the table. I took the liberty of preparing a meal, some of Lauren's favorite recipes, recreated from memory. David's eyes swept the room, taking in the elegant table setting, the expensive china, and most importantly, the fact that Chloe appeared unharmed. She was tense but alert, her hands resting on the table where he could see them. Are you okay? He asked her quietly. I'm fine. He hasn't hurt me. Chloe's voice was steady, but David could see the fear she was trying to hide. He's been telling me stories about my mother, about their relationship. Stories, David repeated, his gaze shifting to Alan. Is that what we're calling 25 years of captivity now? Alan's smile never wavered. Sit down, David. Let's discuss this like civilized people. There's no need for dramatics. I think I'll stand, thanks. David moved slightly closer to Chloe, positioning himself between her and Alan. We're leaving now. Oh, I don't think so. Alan's tone remained conversational, but something had shifted in his posture. You see, Chloe came here of her own free will. She wanted answers about her mother, and I've been more than happy to provide them. What kind of answers? The truth. About Lauren's final years, about her illness, about the peace she found in our arrangement. Alan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small recording device. Would you like to hear her voice, David? I have hours of conversations with her, right up until the end. David's blood ran cold. You recorded her. I documented everything. Our meals together, our discussions about cooking techniques, her thoughts about the daughter she'd given up. Alan pressed a button on the device, and suddenly Lauren's voice filled the room. I hope she's happy, Lauren was saying, her voice thin but unmistakably hers. I hope David found someone else, someone who could give him the family he deserved. David felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Hearing Lauren's voice after 25 years was devastating enough, but the context made it unbearable. She sounded tired, defeated, like someone who had given up hope long ago. Turn it off, David said through gritted teeth. But there's more. Listen to this part. Alan fast-forwarded the recording and pressed play again. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Lauren's voice continued. Maybe I should have trusted David to protect us. Maybe running away just made everything worse. You see, Alan said triumphantly. Even Lauren questioned her decisions. She understood that I was trying to protect her, to give her a life of purpose and meaning. Chloe's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up abruptly. That's enough. I don't want to hear any more. But we're just getting to the best part, Alan protested. The part where she talks about you, about how proud she was of the woman you'd become. You're sick, Chloe said, her voice shaking with rage. You kept her prisoner for 25 years, and now you're using her words to justify it. You're using her death to manipulate me. Alan's facade finally began to crack. Manipulate. I'm offering you everything your mother never had the wisdom to accept. A chance to be part of something greater, to preserve traditions that are dying out in this commercialized world. By becoming your prisoner, by giving up my freedom like she did. Freedom is an illusion, Chloe. Ask any successful chef. Discipline, structure, dedication to craft. That's what creates greatness. Alan stood up, his movements sharp and agitated. Your mother understood that eventually she stopped fighting me, stopped trying to escape. She found peace in accepting her role. She found despair, David said quietly. She found a way to survive psychological torture by giving up hope. You don't know what you're talking about. Alan's voice rose for the first time. I gave her everything she needed. A beautiful kitchen, the finest ingredients, an audience that appreciated her talents. What did you give her? A cramped apartment and a dream that was never going to become reality. David looked around the dining room, taking in the opulent surroundings with new understanding. This wasn't just Alan's private space. It was a shrine to Lauren. The walls were covered with photographs of elaborate meals, handwritten recipe cards, and what looked like a timeline of dishes spanning decades. You built a museum, David said, the pieces finally clicking into place. You've been recreating your relationship with Lauren in this room for 25 years. I've been preserving her legacy, Alan corrected. Every recipe she perfected, every technique she mastered, it's all here, carefully documented and maintained. Chloe followed David's gaze, her face paling as she realized what she was looking at. These are all her recipes, all her cooking, everything she created while she was with me. 25 years of culinary evolution, of refinement and perfection. Alan's voice took on an almost reverential tone. She was a true artist. Chloe and I was her patron, her protector, her muse. You were her captor, Chloe said flatly. I was her salvation. Alan's composure finally shattered completely. Do you have any idea what I saved her from? A life of mediocrity, of cooking for people who couldn't tell the difference between authentic gumbo and the garbage they serve at chain restaurants. I gave her purpose. David's hand found Chloe's arm, squeezing gently. They needed to get out of here before Alan's delusions led to violence. But as he started to guide her toward the door, Alan pulled out a gun. I'm sorry, Alan said, his voice suddenly calm again. But I can't let you leave. Not yet. We have so much more to discuss. The gun was small, but deadly. A chrome-plated revolver that gleamed under the chandelier light. Alan held it with the casual confidence of someone who had used it before. This doesn't have to be difficult, Alan continued. Chloe, all I'm asking is that you listen to what I have to offer. Give me a chance to show you what your mother's life was really like. I know what her life was like, Chloe said, her voice steady despite the weapon pointed at them. She spent 25 years as your prisoner, cooking your meals and pretending to be grateful for the privilege. She was grateful. Eventually, and you will be too. Alan's grip tightened on the gun. Sit down, both of you. Let me show you something. David calculated the distance between himself and Alan, weighing the chances of disarming him before he could fire. But the gun was too steady, Alan too alert. They needed a different strategy. What do you want to show us? David asked, stalling for time. Lauren's final gift to me, her masterpiece. Alan gestured toward a door at the far end of the dining room, the kitchen where she spent her last years, where she created her greatest works. And if we refuse? Alan's smile was cold and final. Then you'll join Lauren in a much more permanent way. The choice is yours. Chloe looked at David, and he saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They were trapped, but they weren't helpless. If they could get Alan into the kitchen, away from the formal dining room, they might have a chance to turn the tables. All right, David said. Show us the kitchen. Alan's face brightened with genuine excitement. Excellent. You won't be disappointed. It's exactly as Lauren left it. Perfectly preserved. As they walked toward the kitchen door, David caught Chloe's eye and mouthed a single word. Ready? She nodded almost imperceptibly. The kitchen was a monument to obsession. Every surface gleamed with stainless steel perfection. Every tool arranged with museum-like precision. But what made David's stomach turn were the personal touches. Lauren's apron hanging on a hook, her favorite wooden spoon displayed in a place of honor, photographs of dishes she'd prepared arranged like trophies on the walls. Beautiful, isn't it? Alan said, his voice full of pride. "This is where your mother found her true calling, Chloe. This is where you'll find yours." That's when Chloe made her move, while Alan was distracted by his own nostalgia. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove and swung it with all her strength. The pan connected with Alan's wrist, sending the gun clattering across the floor. He screamed in pain and rage, lunging toward Chloe, but David was already moving. 25 years of anger and grief powered his fist as it connected with Alan's jaw, dropping him to the kitchen floor. "Chloe, get the gun." She scrambled across the tiles while David pinned Alan down, his knee pressed firmly against the older man's chest. Alan was still conscious but dazed, blood trickling from his mouth. "It's over," David said quietly. "Lauren is free. Chloe is free. And you're going to pay for every day of the last 25 years. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Rose had gotten his message. As they waited for the police, David looked around Lauren's prison one more time. In a few days, this kitchen would be evidence in a criminal trial. In a few weeks, it would probably be dismantled and cleared out. But tonight, it was just a room where a family had finally been reunited and a monster had finally been stopped. Chloe moved to stand beside him, the gun safely in her hands but pointed at the floor. "David, yeah, when we get home, I want to cook that jambalaya again."